First of all, looking out into the world, how will it impact the gentleman from Ghana or the woman from Portugal or from the Philippines? Looking out into the world, how will this election resonate globally? And then I also want you to take the telescope that you're looking out into the world. What does Planet Romney look like? What is Comet Obama right off with no re-election to worry about? Look out there, but then take the telescope and turn it on yourself. And I want you to tell me how the policies that you're debating will affect you personally. And I don't mean who's going to make more money if the Democrats win or the Republicans. I mean, how will this really affect somebody who you care about or yourselves? So I'm going to throw, this is going to be a jump ball. Peter, you're smiling, so I'm going to pick on you.
I actually don't think that the foreign policies of Romney and Obama will be that dramatically different, because I think if you look at American history, what tends to determine presidents' foreign policies are the cards that they're played, the kind of resources they have available in terms of money and military strength and public will. And whoever is president in 2013, the cards they'll be playing will be very weak. America's run out of money to do some of the big kind of things that it wanted to do around the world. And I think that it's going to be a relatively cautious foreign policy by comparative perspective regardless. But I think domestically the consequences are really huge, because the country has to deal with this massive deficit, and it's either going to do so in a way that really guts the social compact that was started in the United States during Franklin Roosevelt and after World War II, in a way that will exacerbate the already just mind-boggling and frightening level of income inequality in the United States, or it will do those very, very tough choices in a way that is more egalitarian, in a way that does cut Medicare and healthcare spending, but also forces Americans at the top to pay a bit more and deals with the defense spending. So I think and I think that will impact how people see the United States, because it will impact what their vision of the American model will be, particularly because if Romney and his vision wins, especially with the Supreme Court, it won't just be that income equality becomes even greater, but the few remaining barriers we have to the ability of the very wealthy to buy elections in the United States will also be repealed. And so our democracy will also grow significantly weaker. Personally, I have to say, I tend to think about my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is a doctor in the Army. When her first daughter was 2, she was sent to Iraq for a year, then she came back and had another baby, and then had to leave both of her small daughters to go and spend 6 months in Afghanistan. And I was more upset the second time, because by the second time she was sent, essentially sending her family into a kind of chaos. You may be aware that we don't have great child care systems, for instance, in the United States. She was being sent to a war that Americans had already forgotten about. Barely anyone in America, Mitt Romney didn't even mention the war in Afghanistan in his acceptance speech. And now I contemplate the possibility, if we don't get out of Afghanistan relatively quickly, that my sister-in-law could be sent back again for a war that most Americans basically assume is over, and almost all foreign policy wonks basically think we've already lost. That, to me, is a truly frightening prospect. So that's what I think about.
Thanks, Peter. Hilary.
I agree with everything Peter said, except for the fact that this election won't have much impact globally. I think it does. And I start with a sort of a basic premise, that the President of the United States controls the military, controls spending, controls foreign aid, but the President also imparts a sense of values that America has had historically, and I think over the last several years has restored globally, which I think we won't know the impact of the aggressive invasion of Iraq and its reputation on America for 25, 30 years, but I think history is going to judge it harshly. And I think that President Obama's perspective of having grown up for many years in Indonesia gives him a sense of global compatibility and global engagement that Mitt Romney just does not have, that has not been exhibited by the Republicans in the United States for many years, maybe since, I don't know, Richard Nixon. And what I think that we get from President Obama is not just sort of a commitment to AID, which is vast, not just a Secretary of State with the dynamism and values of Hilary Clinton, which are phenomenal, but we get a president that actually cares about the people around the world in a fundamental way, and doesn't see the conflict between caring about the global community versus caring about the U.S. I think we've seen the Romney campaign be relatively bombastic over the last few months about their views globally, trying to drive a wedge between, for instance, supporters of Israel versus supporters of the peace process, when we know that that is not a divide that's particularly practical. So I do think it has a significant impact. For me personally, I think as a woman and a mom, you know, it's hard to explain the impact that what are derisively in the United States political arena called the social issues have on this campaign. Whether it's, you know, Mitt Romney's for a healthcare system that discriminates against women's reproductive choices, whether it's or paying for requiring insurance companies to pay for women's health at the same level it pays for men's health, whether we have basic rights to pay, to reproductive decisions, whether gays and lesbians are welcomed for their families, whether our immigrant friends and family are welcomed for their contributions to the United States instead of worrying about whether they'll be deported or discriminated against. Those are the kinds of things I think that most drive me in this election, because I don't think there's any question everyone wants the economy to get better. And I don't think we can separate those two things. I think having whole and valued people encourages those people to be whole and valued and productive members of the economic system that drives the innovation in our country.
Dove.
Well, I agreed with the very first couple of sentences that Hilary
I'm getting there.
Until she mentioned the president. But Hilary's right. What we do matters. What the President of the United States does matter. And the impact on the world is still very, very significant. We've heard panels these last couple of days talk about maybe rising powers, the so-called rest. But we still count. One of the major differences, I believe, between Mr. Romney and the Republicans generally, and Mr. Obama, is this whole question of American exceptionalism. It's not that we think we're superior to everybody, but we're the necessary condition. In fact, it was my good friend with whom I rarely agree, Madeleine Albright, who called us the indispensable power. It is very, very difficult to do anything successfully on an international basis without the United States leading. And I don't mean leading from behind. I mean leading. And what we're seeing in my country today is a significant cut in defense, as if the North Koreans or the Iranians or terrorists anywhere really care about our tax problems. That's not why you spend money on defense. And our posture is there to reassure people. So if we're going to move the bulk of our military capability to East Asia, and we really can't, and I'll get back to that in a minute, but if we were, does that mean the Middle East is going to say, okay, everything will be quiet because you want to move your forces to East Asia? And oh, by the way, if we're cutting our budget by $500 billion, $487 billion to be exact. I used to manage money in the Pentagon, so I keep my numbers pretty clear. Now we have this new sequester, as it's called,
it's a misnomer,
automatic
managing
cuts.
money in the Pentagon.
Sorry?
That sentence, managing money in the Pentagon, it was just...
Well, it's because you've never been there. It can be done. Now we have this new problem of another $492 billion that's going to be cut, nearly $1 trillion from defense. The president has not involved himself, not at all, left it to the Congress, and holds defense hostage to tax fights. Now, I'm not going to talk about taxes because we've got probably the nation's foremost expert on taxes sitting to my right. I don't know why they put me at the extreme left. I'm not. But if we are going to cut our defenses by that amount, what credibility are we going to have to reassure allies? What credibility are we going to have to keep enemies in their place? All we will do is encourage aggression, encourage more crises. And it's true, a president deals with the hand that he is given. Since Hillary Clinton didn't run, it's only a he this year. But you affect that hand. You encourage that hand. You cannot say, oh, the world is on top of me and I'll react. That's what's been going on for 4 years. And sometimes there was no reaction. What happened to the Green Movement in Iran? Here we've heard talk, and peace prizes no less, about hope, about freedom, and I'm all for it. Tell that to the Iranian people. So to me, it makes a huge difference to the world outside, not how we are resolving our domestic economic issues. There are lots of different ways to do it. Reasonable people can disagree. Democrats and Republicans can disagree. Liberals and conservatives can disagree. But the world cares more about what we do on the outside. And my personal view is we've lost that credibility. In terms of my personal, how it affects me personally, thank God I've got 10 grandchildren. And I'm the son of immigrants. And I did pretty well relative to my parents. And my children are actually doing pretty well relative to me. But their children, I'm not so sure. And I think that there is a difference between giving people equal opportunity and fundamentally coming at a problem through redistribution. And I've had too many members of the European Parliament tell me, why are you people trying to do what we tried 20 and 25 years ago? And look where we are today. Is that what we want? That's my personal concern. I want my grandchildren to do better than my children. In any event, everyone knows that the enemy of your children is your grandchildren.
Actually, Doe's granddaughter is in my son's class in 2nd grade, and I asked my son about her, and he said, she's that kid, every class has this one kid who's really good. Well, that's your granddaughter. So.
Yeah, well, she's not like her granddad. What can I tell you?
So, Grover, over to you.
Sure. On economics, if Romney's elected president, there'll be a Republican Senate and a House with it, and you can write the script of what will happen. It's written down. It looked very much like the Ryan budget plan, which has actually been passed overwhelmingly in the Republican House already and gotten the votes on the Republican Senate. It does 3 significant things. It takes all the means-tested welfare programs, the programs that go to lower-income people, and it does for them. This is Medicaid, food stamps. There's 77 major ones, 187 total means-tested welfare programs at the national level. And it does for them exactly what Bill Clinton did for aid to families with dependent children. It block grants them to the states. It allows them to grow with inflation and with population, but not beyond that. So that's one, and over time, it allows states to do what they did with welfare under Clinton's proposals, to try different things and find out what works. Obama hated that at the time. He hates it now. Bill Clinton used to brag about it. He now describes the Republican plan, which is his plan, as a bad thing, but it's replicating something that worked. The second part of that is moving the defined benefit pension plans, both for employment and for things like Medicare, towards defined contribution plans. There's a plan that was actually worked out with Alice Rivlin and Democratic Senator Breaux, and most recently Democratic Senator from Oregon, along with Ryan, which reforms the Medicare program, which saves money but does the saving through competition rather than through rationing. Those are the 2 big ones, and then reductions in domestic discretionary spending that doesn't fall into entitlements. You do that plan, you take spending from 24% of GDP down to 20% of GDP within a decade, and down to 16% of GDP going into 2050. It actually pays off the national debt by allowing economic growth to make the economy grow faster than the government, with two programs, both of which have been endorsed bipartisanly and both of which have worked in other cases, and not scary or different, but very helpful. If Obama wins, we know what Obama would do with the Democratic House and Senate. We lived for 2 years, his first 2 years with that. He gave us another entitlement program that isn't paid for, raised 20 different taxes, didn't reform any entitlement programs or reduce any spending, and he's got a budget that he just put forward for 2012 and the next decade, which increases the debt 11 trillion, total debt increase 11 trillion over the next 10 years. Now, he doesn't have a Democratic House and Senate, so I'm not sure how much of that he can do, but that would be his plan. He'll have to deal with a Republican House and maybe a Republican Senate were he to be elected. That's the big difference on economics. Foreign policy, Obama came in, kept Gitmo going, tripled the number of troops in Afghanistan. How different he was from Bush? No. On Iraq, he was on Bush's timetable. On Afghanistan, he was on Bush's timetable. How different Romney would be from the present president, I'm not certain. As for me personally, I have a 3.5 and a 4-year-old child. I live in Washington, D.C. I'd like to stay in the city. And one of the first official acts that President Obama did when he became president was to end the school choice program, the scholarship program for kids in D.C., 1,600 particularly low-income kids who were given a chance to go to private schools because the D.C. schools do not graduate the people who enter them. They do not do well. It's a failed system. It spends almost as much money for the government-run schools as for Obama's rich kid private school that he sends his kids to, but his school succeeds and the D.C. schools fail. One of the big differences between Republicans and Democrats is whether they're able to work for the kids and parents or whether they have to do what the teachers' unions tell them to. In his first test, Obama said, screw the kids, I'm with the teachers' unions, and a lot of children lost the chance of choice in D.C. As you're seeing across the United States, the teachers' unions are losing that fight state by state, but I think there's a big difference having a president who can say no to the teachers' union rather than one who takes so much money from them that he tells young kids in D.C., I don't care about your future, I'm with the teachers' union, not with you. I think that his approach was a bad one. I think it's bad for the kids, and I don't want his hands on my kids' future.
Grover, I'm going to hang on to you for a minute and talk to you about the economy. You all know the saying, it's the economy stupid. Almost every election is about a referendum on the economy. But if the American economy is struggling, I think we'd all agree that the European economy is really sputtering, right? We heard about this week France is raising taxes. In Spain, they're instituting austerity measures, which includes raising taxes. The people are in the streets protesting. They're not too happy about that. Grover, you're the tax master. Assuming that we do have a President Romney and you're his chief economic advisor, how would you help Europe as they struggle to get out of this economic crisis? What kind of advice or assistance would you offer to Europe on their economic crisis?
Emigrate to the United States. Because you would emigrate to the United States.
You would emigrate.
Because if we've elected Romney,
Quick, before it becomes Europe.
Well, but you started the question.
Most Republicans wouldn't let you in, is the difference.
We do need to reform our immigration laws.
Immigration policy, economic policy.
But as opposed to this president's. But what we do have, we talked about spending when I first explained the difference between the two presidential candidates. On the tax policy, Romney and Ryan have been equally clear. They want to move to a top rate corporate and individual of 25%. The European average, OECD average, is about 25 to 24%. The United States, we're at 39% when you count state as well as national corporate income taxes. And we have a worldwide tax system, us, North Korea, and Zimbabwe, which is probably not the way to structure your tax policy. So the good news is we go to 25 corporate and individual, and the president is committed to reforming immigration at a minimum to dramatically increase talent engineers, scientists, and others in the United States. I think we should dramatically increase immigration in general across the board. I think it's what makes us the United States of America.